Conservative Voice Radio. You are listening to KMET 1490 AM. You can also listen online at KMET1490am.com. All right, welcome to the program, and the Democrat insanity never stops. That's the way Jan has put it. And speaking of Jan, we've got, let's see, in the studio, is it Jan, Peter, Glenn? Do you have Diane with you?
Nope, she's working today.
Okay, so we got the Banning Beaumont Cherry Valley Tea Party folks also in the other studio. So if you're watching on KMET TV, there'll be a split screen going on, and you'll see Peter and Glenn on one half, and yours truly on the other half. For once, I've got a collared shirt on. I've been getting kind of lazy and lax lately, and Glenn's been pointing it out.
Yeah, we need that. We need that suit and tie and white.
Yeah, we need the tie. You know what? It's too hot for the tie. You know, during the winter I wear the tie. Get to the summer, it starts getting too hot for the tie. But anyway, so this bill, this Equality Act, it's anything but equality. I don't even. I'm speechless, but I'm not surprised. Does that make sense, Jan?
Yes, it does. And if you're speechless, I'll jump in. How's that? Okay. In a nutshell, here's the thing. I got to thinking about it because when they referred to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and decided to amend it, I realized that gave them cover. Why cover? Because this is what they're going to do, and these are just bullet points, and the guys are going to go into more detail. It makes traditional marriage a, quote, sex stereotype. Openly supporting traditional marriage will be illegal. Yes, you heard that right. Opposition, conversely, to LGBTQ ceremony is illegal. It mandates abortion nationally, no matter what Alabama says or Ohio or Kentucky or whatever. It provides a lot of provisions for adoption, so you can't just, be a couple going for adoption. I see all kinds of quagmire there. And every religious institution will be impacted. And that is just some of it. And I have to say, the very last line, listen to this. True Democrats, they put all these little landmines in their bills. This one amends the Fair Housing Act, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and jury selection standards to add sexual orientation and gender identity as classes protected against discrimination under such law.
Yeah, this is Peter, by the way, and how's everybody doing? Hello to all our veterans.
Peter, are you recognizing the tyrannical nature of this that I am?
Well, what I'm recognizing is what are the practical applications of how they apply this? How do they make this real in our communities? And I'm thinking of our schools, our institutions of higher learning and college. I'm thinking of our police, our healthcare personnel. How does this affect, like, if my wife got arrested and had to be searched, God, forbid that, is it going to be, who's going to do a search on her? Who's going to be in the locker room of my daughter's high school?
Well, it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that, Peter, because how do you enforce something like this? The only way you can really enforce it is to have Americans tattling on each other, turning each other in.
Well, Doug, the purpose of this law, I think, is to just another law that they're passing in order to do selective enforcement to go after people.
Well, sure. And I mean, what it does, it's going to penalize Americans who refuse to comply with accepting their norms, their gender identity and homosexuality, and so it's going to compel speech. Now you're not allowed to say certain things. You're already going to be able to say certain things. It could shut down charities.
Well, I think it's already having that effect.
I mean, it's going to allow more biological males to get into sports, into female sports, and so much for protecting women. You want to talk about a crisis there. It could be used to coerce medical professionals.
It's the end of women's sports, folks.
Yeah, it's the end of women's
sports.
Women's identity,
if you ask me.
Parents losing custody of their own children because
Yeah,
the child says, well, I want to be a female. Well, you can't. They lost their child. And it would enable sexual assault, I believe. So, I mean, and one of the things we can talk about is where recently there was a 5-year-old girl in a girl's restroom was assaulted by a boy, but he had access because he considered himself transgender. So it's actually opening up all kinds of problems.
This group of people that identify as transgender, I believe, is a very small sliver of the population.
Oh yeah.
Now you have this the group on the left who promote this lifestyle, and anybody who says that's not okay, you're now got to be labeled and you're a bigot. You're a bigot. You're hateful, but what this really is about a majority of politicians wanting power and silencing the people that this offends their sensibilities. This really goes against men and women's identity
and reality
and biology, but we can get into that on another time.
Well, I thought they were the party of science.
Yeah, no. So what they want to do is impose this on, maybe 70% of the population that says, I don't think this is good, the direction we're going. And so this sliver of the politicians want to impose this weird ideology.
It shuts down religion. Glenn, you were starting to talk about Title IX.
Yeah, Title
Why don't
IX,
you tell us about that?
Yeah, Title IX is a special law in the Civil Rights Code that opened up a lot of sports to women in colleges and universities, and federal funding for that for women in order to bring them up to where men were. Men were much more active in sports. And there's been a big increase in the number of scholarships specifically for women and women only. Now, what's happened, we've seen men claim to be women, take some hormones or whatever they do, or castrate themselves or something, and then they go into women's sports and they come out way ahead because they're 10 to 15% stronger than women.
They have muscle mass and the women don't.
Bone density stronger, so on and so forth.
And they're winning overwhelmingly. I watched the congressional testimony. The top sports in running, the 400 meter, there was 15,000 men that could outrun her. And she was the top in the world.
Right.
Yet there was 15,000 men that, boom, they beat her time constantly. So this will end sports for women over a period of time. If 8 men sign up for that particular sport, boom, all the women are out.
And this from the party who says this is a woman's right to choose when they talk about killing babies.
And you can see they're also their priority for women's protection in the third world. The left doesn't care about women's protection that are legitimately abused overseas and across the globe. We see it time and time again. This is a little microcosm of the left abandoning 60% of the women, and they're saying we're gonna placate to this real 1%, this 2%, just so that we can label the Republicans as haters and bigots. That's what we want to do. That's our agenda. So here, let's push this confusion.
But we're going to put all this large percentage of females at risk.
Oh yeah, absolutely at risk.
Safety wise, health wise.
Think of the prisons. Think of our schools. Think of the hospitals. Think of all where women need privacy and they need protection. And we're going to open it up to this 1% who don't even identify. This is the product also of the left. They try to separate gender and sexuality. They try to make them separate. And they say, it has to be separate because a 5-year-old cannot be motivated by sexuality and choose its gender and want to play with cars and trucks and flowers. Well, a 5-year-old really doesn't think like an adult either.
Doug?
Well, and what about the 5-year-old in the women's restroom alone and a bearded man walks in?
Yes.
Now, if the father follows that child and hears her scream, goes in and beats up the transgender guy, by this bill, he will do time.
Now, let's add one more element. I have a feeling Glenn was getting ready to ask me about this. Where in the Constitution does it give the federal government the authority to even be involved in these issues? There is no authority in the Constitution. It's none of the federal government's business. They are acting illegally constitution-wise.
Yeah, Doug, what I wanted to say is some good news. Yesterday, between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., I was at the superintendent of school at 601 East Street in San Bernardino, and hundreds of people showed up to demonstrate all four corners. They're really upset with the government, especially the Democrats in Sacramento, because of SB 329, which basically is going to be teaching what we would call pornographic type material to junior high school kids.
If you were to give that material to those kids, you'd be a sexual predator.
Right. And that's a warning. Our audience ought to know this. If you took the same material, and you can get copies of it if you dig around, and you presented that to one of your neighbor's children, you could be arrested by the local police or the county sheriff, prosecuted for a pedophile, and be marked for the rest of your life as a sexual predator for presenting pornography type material to minors. Now, that's the kind of stuff they're going to teach you to your children and your grandchildren. We're dealing, the Communist Party 40 years ago said we have to infiltrate your schools and your institutions and Congress and the government and take over. And they've done that. They've successfully done that. 2 years ago, there was a movie out called The Enemy Within, and it identified 120 U.S. congressmen and senators, and nearly all were Democrats, that were affiliated with the Communist Party, USA, and communist-leaning institutions. They have infiltrated our government, and now it's time for the people to rise up before they take your Second Amendment and your freedom of speech. Right now, government employees are afraid to talk. They fear losing their job. I was talking to somebody the other day in Beaumont that worked for the county, and he looked in both directions, and he was afraid to talk. He said, I could lose my job.
Well, there's only one way to fix this, folks. Stop voting Democrat. These insane laws are all theirs, and they have the majority in California. We have to take their power away because you see what they're doing with their power. This is a Marxist plan, straight up.
And that's why we have conservative voice radio, because we still have this opportunity and we can afford to do it. And we're trying to get the message out there because we're looking for people willing to stand up or have the courage to fight back. God bless that 300 or 400 people. They were cycling in and out with their signs for 2 hours down there, standing up to the government and sending them a strong message. We need to keep at it, folks.
Well, and I want to say that they use fear and intimidation as a tactic. They want to label people as bigots. And I want the people to know in this area that I believe that there's a majority of people in this area that think that the policies that are being instituted from up above are a problem, but they just don't want to speak out. And the problem is because most of the, I guess the issues when the rubber meets the road is issues like this, and the Democrats like the drama and the stress, and they like the people pitted against each other, but it's a small sliver that promote these ideas.
Right. I want to say one more thing that's important to the people out there. We're seeing an uptick, a big uptick in suicides of our youth. And what is causing it? I think it's sexual confusion about their identity and this preaching of global warming where the world's going to come to an end. And that's a product of the progressive left, which now controls the Democratic Party leadership. These people are evil, and they're causing the death of some of our children out here today.
You mentioned the Enemies Within movie earlier, and you said 120. It's actually 100, over 100 members of Congress, members of the House and the Senate. But here's what was interesting. You said almost all of them were Democrats. You're right. All of them were Democrats except for one. The one that was not a Democrat was an independent. But he is now the leading Democrat nomination.
Bernie
Sanders.
Yeah.
He was an independent at the time of the film.
Yeah, he honeymooned in Moscow.
Now understand that film. It had to do with members of Congress having affiliation with either the Democratic Socialists of America, Communist Party USA, or the Muslim Brotherhood. And none of them would be able to pass a background check to clean the toilets of the very buildings they serve as Congress critters in.
One thing I like to
be aware
say,
of that. That's what we're up against here.
H.R. 5 was passed by Congress. It was voted on
By the House.
by the House.
Not the whole
Senate's not going
Congress.
to pass it.
It won't go anywhere from there. But here's the point. They will use H.R. 5 to recruit out of that very small minority of Americans a large group of radicals to work on the Democratic campaigns, do voter harvesting and work the phones. These people are sick. They're going after our youth, and they're using the natural sexuality of our children. And we want our children to grow up, become adults, and develop. They don't want that. They want children to be run by their emotions and fear.
You know, Glenn,
And by the government.
The Bolsheviks supported homosexuality and these types of groups also during the Russian Revolution. But you know what
That's
they
right.
did to these groups after they finally gained control, right?
They were gone.
They killed them all.
To the
All right,
gulag.
let's go to break. And when we come back, we got the next topic. And Jan and Glenn and Peter and I will discuss that topic, the border. The border still?
Yeah.
Oh,
what
boy.
a new idea, talking about the border.
Yeah, well,
Got some
guess what?
shocking
That's our
numbers.
topic after the break.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere. And the next topic is immigration. But before I get into what Jan has for us, a caller called into my program and left a message for me because they didn't want to be on the air, asking, did I know about all of the illegal aliens that were dumped at the Murrieta Border Patrol facility last night?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked it up yet. I'm still learning, but it sounds to me like a Rocky fight. Did you watch Rocky? It's like, I mean,
Which one? 3? I like 3.
Yeah,
That was
I
nice.
like
all,
one.
all of them are great except for 5. I don't own 5 on purpose. But but I mean, it's like boom, boom. They're just constantly hitting. They hit back, and they do it quickly.
They
Donald
hit
Trump
dark
is
of
doing what
night.
he can with an immigration plan that makes sense and actually follows the law, follows the Constitution. I love the fact that he loves to call the bluff of the left when they start arguing about sanctuary cities and illegal aliens. He says, okay, fine, we'll send all the illegals to the sanctuary cities. Oh, wait a second. They start backing
Yeah,
up.
But Doug, let me stop you, because he was about to send thousands to Florida. They
Right.
screamed bloody murder. And by the way, they were on Facebook saying, oh, that's so mean. How can? And I said, did you know that the cities of El Paso, Yuma, all the little towns in New Mexico plus California are inundated? The NGOs cannot take any more people. These are the church charities. So Florida said no. Guess what? California was getting that load. That's what happened in Murrieta.
So that's what happened last night. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And Phoenix also. We're up to over 100,000 people come over in April, and it looks like it's going to be over 100,000 every month. 73% of American citizens according to a survey, do not know the number of illegal aliens that are flooding our country. And it's causing lots of problems, lots more disease outbreaks. Even in our area here in Beaumont, I'm seeing more people down with coughs and cold. Lots of areas are coming down with measles. And if you overlay the sanctuary communities with the measles outbreak, they overlay each other. That's one of the sources
the
of disease.
The 2014 immigration standoff of Murrieta, I was one of the people that actually was in that from the very beginning. I was one of the original dozen when that wound up expanding into this nationwide thing.
Right.
And
You
here's
guys
what-
And
and
you
talking
stopped the bus during
Yeah.
the Obama administration. We need to let the people know this went on during Obama. This is not a Trump thing.
Right.
Just
Now,
shows
but I
those
want people to understand something.
after.
Let me get to my point here. This is the reason why I'm bringing this up. I got to know the Border Patrol people very well at that time. 182 people were being delivered every other week. And out of those 182, every single one of them was sick with something. Tuberculosis, some, scabies, some, measles, some, and some worse things. All of them were sick, first of all. So when I got on television and they asked me about why I was standing against this, I said, hey, my granddaughter just a few weeks ago was diagnosed with hand, mouth, foot disease. And this is something we haven't had in Marietta. And suddenly we've got this spike. I'm doing it for my community. And the left was freaking out. Oh, wait a second. Conservatives aren't supposed to talk about community. So I'm doing this for my community because disease is coming in. It's a health hazard for my community. And it goes even beyond that. But I mean, that's just part of it. Go ahead, Peter. I can see you moving towards the mic.
It just affects aspects of everybody's life who lives here already.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about we don't want any more. We can always use more and increase our productivity. That's not what it's about. It's not about a stopping of the flow of those who want to come work hard and make themselves and their families better. We have a problem in California where our politicians don't let us build homes. They don't let us build schools. They don't let us build hospitals. We are just overcrowded, and we just can't take anymore.
And they don't build reservoirs for more water.
They don't build reservoirs for water. They want us to be in constant commotion. Like Glenn was saying, they scare our children. I have 4 children in public school, and they all think we're going to run out of water tomorrow.
Right.
If Dad leaves the water running while I brush my teeth, I have committed a sin. I'm the enemy.
Plus, we're going to die in 12 years.
And so the teachers, I love teachers. I have a lot of friends who are teachers and administrators. But this notion of the environmentalists, it's a hysteria. It's a fear tactic.
It's child abuse.
It's child abuse. Now we have, if I wanted to take my poor sick daughter to the emergency room, I have to wait 6 hours. Now, what's racist about having a problem with that?
Well, and let me talk about the pay for. We have immigrants here now that are low skilled. When those newbies come in, who do you think's going to take their jobs? This hurts everybody in the whole cycle.
This hurts the very neighborhoods that are voting for this stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
And my teenagers can't get a starting job to build skills to get to the next job. And they're handicapped from the very beginning of my young kids, my teenagers, they want a job. They want to work at McDonald's, but they can't.
Because they used to before they flooded the border.
Right. And then they got a skill and they could write it on their resume and then they could springboard to something else, but they can't do that now.
Okay, let's get back to our subject of the border. ICE, which is the one that enforces our laws for the border, just hired a private contractor to transport and distribute 225,000 migrants or illegal aliens to shelters all across the United States. They're getting to where their manpower is being used changing diapers and babysitting people and taking care of them, and yet hundreds of thousands are still heading towards the United States. The Democrats are sitting back and laughing at the American people, creating this problem for us to try to deal with while they're communizing and taking over the government, and they spend day after day blaming Donald Trump for a problem they've created, and they're using judges to shut down any effort by the Trump administration to stop this problem.
Well, we are in trouble. And to show you how stupid the left is on this, one of the things that's backfiring on them is this situation because, see, the Mexicans were fine when the illegal aliens were Mexican. Now the illegal aliens are Honduran, Guatemalan, from Belize, El Salvadorian.
The serial killer from
Cuba.
The serial killer from Texas is Kenyan. He's killed like 18 elderly women.
I'm just talking about the Hispanic neighborhood right now, the Hispanic community. Mexicans have always believed that the persons from the Central American countries south of Mexico are a lower class. In fact, when they started showing up in Tijuana, you actually heard Tijuanans saying that. These were lower class people. And that Trump is right. He doesn't want them in the country. See, Mexicans are fine with illegal aliens if they're Mexican. But they don't like illegal aliens if they're from other parts of Central America. So what's happening in these neighborhoods, and I know this, my wife's Mexican, and I'm finding out about this through her family, is that now there's violence in these neighborhoods because the Hondurans aren't getting along with the Mexicans. The Guatemalans aren't getting along with the Hondurans, and so on and so forth. And so it's also creating, number one, violence in the neighborhood. But number two, what's happening is the Mexicans are going, okay, we were voting Democrat, but now you guys have gone too far. You're letting the Hondurans in.
Well, let me tell you a story that my family, family were immigrants in 1912 and came through Ellis Island. My uncles told me a story. This was before I was born, that there were actual fistfights in the streets between Germans and Italians and Poles and what have you. So we literally have the same situation. However, that situation was unique in that they came through Ellis Island, they were all documented, and they had sponsors, and it was orderly. This is just a mad, chaotic rush, and we have no idea. Are they carrying something dangerous? Are they renting children, which is what is happening? They're recycling the kids, and they're finding out their DNAs don't match.
Right, yeah.
While this is happening, the cartels are going right through the open areas where Trump wants a wall. And the families are flooding the ports of entry. So the cartels are laughing and making billions because they charge these poor families $10,000 a person. A life savings for them.
There is an answer to this, and that's for people out there to start organizing and getting together in small groups, set up little private communications groups amongst themselves, start working for conservative Christian candidates that believe in the principles of the United States, our free republic, and fighting back. If you're just sitting back doing nothing, you're actually part of the problem. If this country goes down, it's going to be because of the good people, not the bad people. Bad people are just normally bad.
It sounds like a Burke's quote, right?
Yeah.
That's good, Glenn. I like that.
Yeah, things happen when good people do nothing.
Yeah,
right.
And these
exactly.
bad people, they're just a small minority. 1,500 people enslaved over a couple 100 million Russian citizens. 1,500 elite, top-notch communists enslaved the whole nation. They can do the same thing here. Enslave 329 people with 1,500 or so elite, hiring a bunch of brainless bureaucrats that'll bow down on their knees for a little bit of money. And we got to stop it. This is America. We're free people, and we need to stay that way.
That's right, Glenn. The politicians say that these are people trying to flee their communities because they fear their environment back home. These people do not fear where they're coming from. They are coming for an economic opportunity, and they might even be being paid to travel here. We hear all the time that they're getting funding from all kinds of nefarious sources, and they're put on buses and they're shuffled up here through Mexico. I don't know if we followed Mexico's immigration laws, we wouldn't have a problem like we do today, would we?
Well, let me end this because we're running out of time here with two other things. Number one, you'll notice this is not about trying to get here quickly, because the shorter route would be to Texas, not to California. It's the longer route. So there's something more going on than just coming to America. Number two, I'm going to end this with the same thing that I told the NAACP 3 or 4 years ago when I was on a panel at an NAACP event where they asked me about immigration. And to me, this is just common sense. I turned to the crowd and I said, before you came tonight, did you lock your door? Did you lock your door? You locked your door not because you think everybody on the outside is a problem, but because you know that element exists out there. You locked your door not because you hate everybody on the outside, but because you love everybody on the inside. That border, that's our door. All I ask is they knock, they ask, and that they're vetted. That's all I ask. Because even at your own home, when you're home, you don't just open the door to anybody. You peek through the door and you vet them before you let them into your house. It's just common sense.
You're dealing with criminals, Doug. You can ask all you want. They're going to spit in your face.
Well, we're dealing with an element that I believe the reason why they're against the wall and all this other stuff is because the establishment has its hand in human trafficking, pedophilia, drugs, gun running. I mean, I think the list that not just Democrats, but some of the Republicans, but the establishment, the machine is guilty of, makes the mob look innocent.
Right.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we got one more topic. Welcome back, Conservative Voice Radio. I haven't been woke apparently, and I don't know what woke is. I don't know if I want to be woke. Jan, am I supposed to be woke or not woke? What is a woke?
Yes. Yes.
Is that like a midget Wookiee?
No, about a year ago, this came up in the social media hemisphere, and it literally means the kids, of course, have taken this over, and it means, are you up on what the social media norms are? Now, to us, they're abnormal. They're not norms, but this would be the PC grammar and attitudes of the left. So when you say someone is woke, you have given them a gold star.
Right. It gives them credence, right? Like
yes.
they have at some point in the past acknowledged that they believe in implicit bias, in the patriarchy,
and
is
they
bad.
accept it.
And they now fight for it now. And if you oppose it, you're now going to get yelled out of a restaurant.
Well, let me give you an example.
Them, you're asleep.
An example.
Yeah, you're asleep. That's right. You're asleep at the switch.
An example of woke is Beto apologizing for his white privilege, and he apologized because his wife was raising the kids. How do you apologize for who you are? I mean, I learned in kindergarten you don't do that.
Right, Beto. It's Beto. But anyway.
I call him Beto because he thinks he's a Beto male, but he's not.
I just call him O'Rourke. They all try to change their name so that they can deflect from the fact that they're the same thing over and over.
So he's supposed to be Mexican. Elizabeth Warren is supposed to be Native American.
Yeah.
Rachel Dolezal thought she was black.
She's black.
These people don't even know what they are. I mean, they don't even know which bathroom to use. So I kind of guess that law makes sense now.
Well, after the Equality Act, if it's Tuesday, I could be a boy, right?
Well, identity politics is what the Democrats have hung their hat on. And they're pushing, that's why they're pushing this white privilege. And they're creating all kinds of victims groups. And this new H.R. 5, that was one of the reasons for that, more victim groups. And you're right. They've got two white old men that are now at the top of the ticket, and Joe Biden's right at the top. And he's not qualified. I think he's technically qualified, but
because he's breathing.
Right. Tucker said, I want you to watch Joe Biden for 2 minutes here, or a minute. And he put him on television. He said, we're not going to edit it. We're not going to do anything. We just want you to watch him talking. And he was answering a couple questions to people around him. And you watched him, and he says, well, there's 4 things, and one of them, and then number 4. And he was all over the place. He made no rational sense. And Tucker says, all he said, it speaks for itself. That man's not going to be president.
Yeah.
So are you saying that we would get more activity out of Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's than we're getting from Biden?
Probably. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
It's just unbelievable what's going on. But they've already hung their hat on identity politics. So they're going to have to go with a colored person.
Well, now, wait a minute. Let me tell you how the SAT scoring is woke now.
Okay.
What they're doing
is... you mean the topic? Oh, yeah.
Yes, topic. Okay. This, and I emailed my daughter because my granddaughter is now taking SAT tests, okay? And what they will do is give an adversity score to a student. So, first of all, if you grew up in a crack household, your score would be above 50 because that means hardship. If your mom dealt drugs, you might get a 51. Anyway, I'm making a joke of it.
Because nothing says equality like preferential treatment.
Yeah, exactly. So the heck with getting the answers right and getting an actual high score. You're going to be checked on the census in your community. So if you live in a gated community, no, you're going to get a 10. And if you live in public housing, you might get a 55. So the question I have to ask, because the colleges are being sued on race because they've kept the Asian kids out of Harvard and Yale over race, they now have found a back door to race, and they call it the adversity score. So are you woke enough to get this?
Yeah, and this is put on an exam that is strictly academic, right? So you go in and you take a math part of it, you take an English part of it, you write it down, and then you turn it in. And then it's given to people who look at it, and then they look at it again, and they look at your race. And then they look at it again, and then they look at your socioeconomic status. And then they look at, your marital situation.
And by the way, it's secret. They will not tell you the adversity score, but it is compiled as to whether you get in or you don't.
And they won't even tell the government. They'll keep it inside the institution. They won't turn it over to the government so that the public can see it. And who decides on this board who gets it and who doesn't get the reward?
Well, they use
a nameless person.
They use an outside contractor. Why? So the university can't be sued. They've thought of everything.
Well, they'll still be sued. But this idea that an adversity score. See, I grew up in Diamond Bar, California. Now, Diamond Bar is even more so than it was back then, but it was 60% Asian at the time. So I went to high school, and there were PSAT training, like academies all around the high school where the students would leave school and they would go directly into the practice. And these people made money on that, right? They would test the other kids, kind of like the mathnasium, or where people had, you could send your kids to after school. But this notion that a bureaucrat in a college setting is going to give preferential treatment over someone else just on politics, that stinks.
Jan, was this triggered, this new system, because of people paying $500,000 to get their kids? They worked in Hollywood, had lots of money.
Triggered a trigger word?
Yes. No, in actuality, it's already being used in 150 colleges. So it was prior to that, but the scandal with the college is an offshoot of that. In other words, any way to get your kid in. But 150 colleges are using it now. By 2021, all colleges will be using it.
And now, if this stuff was going on when I was younger, they would be like, okay, grew up in right outside of South Compton, grew up in poverty. Oh, this guy really needs. Oh, wait, he's white. Never mind. Next.
Yeah. Well, the scoring would go that you would be like 55 because you grew up in Compton, and then they would look at the race and they go, no, 22. He was the token white in Compton.
About 3 blocks out of South Compton. I grew up in Snoop Dogg's neighborhood. Maybe you can just start calling me Snoop Dogg. But my parents actually moved to Corona to get away from the gangs because it was so bad. So I went to high school in Corona, but before all that, before my teenage years, man, it was a rough area. There's no white privilege going on here, brother. There is no white privilege going on here.
But the thing is, it's subjective, guys. Yeah. If you really think about it, say you have worked your way up. Like, look at Ben Carson. He comes from the projects, became a well-known brain surgeon. Okay, if you looked at his scores at a midpoint, would you have scored him higher or lower? Okay.
But this goes back to what I said earlier. Nothing says equality like preferential treatment. They're giving preferential treatment to certain people, and then they're calling it equality. Right. I mean, think about the absurdity of it.
Yeah, they have to try to fix what was wronged in the past. And so this is how they try to fix what was wronged in the past, by taking authority away from people to make their own decisions and what motivates them to better their situation. And it just causes instability amongst everyone. Everyone's questioning.
If I was on the receiving end of that, Peter, I'd be ticked because you're saying because of something that happened to my
adversity score, my math,
I'm somehow stupider?
Yeah, it undermines your math, your high math score and your high English score by giving this adversity score. So people now constantly walk around and they judge one another like he doesn't deserve it, she doesn't deserve it. And this is what the politicians want. They want us at each other all the time. But that's
what they're doing, Peter. When they look at you and say white privilege, never knowing how you grew up, you might have grown up in the projects.
Yeah.
And that, to me, it was the beginning of this. And we are going down the wrong road here in America, folks. This is not the America I grew up.
This is not just immoral; it's downright dangerous.
This is another
And what it does is sets up revolution.
Yeah, it's another way to take merit out of the system. Now you don't have to produce on merit anymore. Now you just have to, I don't know, feel good about it.
I saw a clip just the other day of Pelosi addressing the term merit-based, and when she said it, it was almost like she wanted to throw up.
It was about Trump's immigration plan. Yes, you're right, Doug.
Yeah, and anything has to do with merit, anything has to do with that, well, that's just not acceptable.
Yeah, these elites, they hate that. They hate it because it undermines their status, because they do nothing.
Well, yeah, I hate to say this, guys, but we're almost out of time. We got about 2.5 minutes left of the program. So how about we do this real quick, because Peter has been on the program, and I don't think anybody really knows him much. So why don't you spend about a minute and a half letting people know who's joined our program here?
Absolutely. So my name's Peter Stevenson. I have 4 children. They're in public school here in Beaumont High School and Highland, and I'll just say it. And I think that I'm a local business owner here and just a local community member who's been woke. And I think that I think there's a lot more people in our community that just don't speak up, but they feel the same way about it. You know, I went to UCR. I went to University of California institutions, and I saw what was coming, even though I wasn't politically active, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And then I met Glenn, and he helped me get woke, and Jan too. And I just think, this is a time to be engaged and to say to our community, we're not as different as the politicians say we are. We actually believe in the same things: family, God, Christ. We have a general idea what's best for our community. These politicians try to pit us once again against each other, and I'm glad. Thanks for having me. I'm not going to stand for it anymore, and I'm going to shout as long as I can. Well,
I appreciate you joining the program for 2 reasons. Number one, because you have a very sane voice. You know what's going on. You really get it, and you're what you say is well thought out and on target. But the second reason is because you're younger, and us. I'm usually the kid in the room, and I got 7 grandkids. The reality is your generation and younger is not involved, and we want you guys involved. You guys carry the torch after we're gone.
A lot of us are scared. A lot of us don't want to force our ideology on younger people, because I'm the last of the Generation X or whatever, but I'm 40, and so we played rough sports in middle school and elementary school. The next generation didn't. So I think that we just need to talk to our younger people and say, hey, there's a better way than playing patty cake. And sometimes our Constitution, which preserves our freedoms and our happiness and our peace and our security, that needs to be protected. Because once that's undermined, then it's chaos. And then I'm glad we got a Second Amendment at that point. But until that point, we want to have love and law and order and try to learn and grow and cherish one another and be the greatest country on earth.
Yeah, we're out of time, but I will say this: the right to keep and bear arms secures all of the other rights. Glenn, Jan, let everybody know what you think of and say goodbye.
We love you guys. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Trump 2020.
This has been Conservative Voice Radio. We'll see you next week. I am Douglas Gibbs. The Banning Beaumont Cherry Valley Tea Party meets every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. for informal breakfast and discussion. And they meet each month on the second Thursday at 5 p.m., all at the Farms House Restaurant in Banning. Listen to interesting speakers, learn about our Constitution with our free classes, enjoy friendly discussions, and informal dining. Come join us. For more information, call Glenn Stull, 951-316-3843.